Today we're going to talk about the classification of life. This is also known as taxonomy. So make sure you have your notes in front of you and get ready to dive into the world of classification. So get a life. The first thing you need to know is that all of these numbers that I found are for life on Earth. On Earth, there are estimated to be over 8.7 million animals, 435,000 different types of plants, and over 1 trillion bacteria and microbes. My goodness, that is a lot of life on Earth. And guys, how do scientists talk about this life on Earth? Well, back in the day, this guy named Linnaeus created a system of grouping, and we still use this as our basic grouping today. And in this system, the largest group is called a kingdom. You've probably heard about a kingdom in your previous learning in science. So these go from the greatest, most all-encompassing broad group, which is domain. Then as we move our way down, we become more and more specific to specific organisms, and those categories contain the least number of organisms. So it goes domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So this is how we organize life. And on your notes page, next to this graphic, you will see that there is a spot for a mnemonic device. Remember, a mnemonic device is a way for us to remember complicated or complex things. So right now, I'd like you to think, how can we remember that the order goes domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can come up with your own mnemonic device. All right, hopefully you've thought about your own mnemonic device. I am going to give you one as an example, and my example is Dear King Philip came over for good soup. So Dear King Philip came over for good soup. D, dear, domain, K, king, kingdom. So as you can see, we can remember this organization system by remembering Dear King Philip came over for good soup. You might have thought of even a better mnemonic device, and I would love it if you shared it with me. So here's another way to look at our classification of species. We can see in the kingdom of animals, we have all of these different animals. Then we have this phylum of Chordata. That means that they have a backbone. So we get rid of that butterfly because insects do not have internal bones. Then we come down to our class, which is mammals, and so we get rid of the fish because a fish is not a mammal. And then we come down to our order of carnivores, and we get rid of an elephant because an elephant is not a carnivore. And then we come to our family, and our family is canines, which are dogs, so we get rid of the lion. And then we come down to our genus, which is Canis, which gets rid of our fox friend, and then we come all the way down to our species. And so this is the way that our classification works. I want you to take a look at this animal. What a gorgeous, gorgeous creature. And I want you to think in your brain, what do you call this animal? If someone said, what is the name of this animal? What would you say? Now, there are so many names for this organism. I would probably call it a mountain lion. However, it's also called in the United States a puma, a panther, even a deer tiger, and a cat of the mountain, and a catamount. When I looked this up, there were so many names for this animal. So how do scientists know what animal they're talking about if there can be dozens of different names? It makes science really hard. Imagine I was having a conversation with someone and explaining to them all about a mountain lion. And let's say they'd never heard of a mountain lion before. Maybe they have no idea what I'm talking about. Or something gets lost in translation because they're talking about panthers. So what on earth is a scientist to do? How do we effectively communicate about different species? Well, don't you worry. Scientific naming is here to save the day. And so now we're going to learn about scientific naming. Scientific naming is very important because it allows scientists to effectively communicate about the organisms which they're speaking, no matter where they're from, no matter what language they speak, no matter what they might call it, a puma, a mountain lion, a panther, no one knows. But living organisms, or all organisms, have specific scientific names. And when we're talking about scientific names, those include the genus and the species. They are the most specific and therefore the smallest level of organization. You can kind of think about them as a first and last name. In addition to calling them scientific naming, we also sometimes call them binomial nomenclature. And when we write binomial nomenclature or scientific naming, we have the genus name capitalized and the species name lowercase. And most often you will see them written in italics. Sometimes you'll see them underlined. So for example, humans' genus and species name is Homo sapiens. You've probably heard that before. And our cute little animal at the beginning that was a puma or a panther or who even knows what has a scientific name, and that is Puma concolor. And so when you are communicating with anyone around the world, if you're not sure what to call an animal, you can always call it by its scientific name. So once again, this is our scientific name. You can notice that the first word is capitalized, the second word is not capitalized, and this is in italics. So I just wanted to share with you some really funny scientific names that I found. This is a Tibetan blackbird. I think he's pretty cute. I like his little beak. I like how his beak matches his little feet. It's pretty cute. But his scientific name is Turdus maximus. That is pretty crazy. And something that's really interesting for you to know is that if you discover a new species, you get to come up with the scientific name. So that you need to keep in mind as we learn about more crazy names. I like this little land snail here. His name is the Bah-humbuggy, and he's pretty cute, but Bah-humbuggy, kind of like bah humbug. It's a pretty cute name for a land snail. And then last but not least, look at this horsefly, which actually on first glance, I thought looked a lot like a bee of some sort because of that yellow and black striping. But this is called Aescaptia Beyonce, and it was literally named after Beyonce. The the scientist who discovered this organism loved Beyonce, and so they literally named this horsefly after Beyonce. So I just think that's so cool. I would love to live in a world where either I discovered a species and could name it whatever I wanted, or I'd love to be famous and cool enough, or maybe one of you cool scientists listening to this now will discover your own species and maybe name it after me, and that'd be so cool. So we've talked a little bit about the history of classification, about how Linnaeus gave us this basic organizational system. We've talked about naming organisms and why that's so important for scientists and people to effectively communicate. And now we're going to talk about the state of organization today. So today there are 6 kingdoms, and you need to know though that this system is always changing. It's important to know that Eubacteria kingdom and the Archaebacteria kingdom sometimes are grouped together into the Monera kingdom, and that's because both of those kingdoms deal with prokaryotic and bacterial cells. So here are our 6 kingdoms of life: Animalia, Plantae, Fungi, Protista, Eubacteria, and Archaebacteria. And like I said, sometimes those last 2 are combined together, but these are our 6 kingdoms of life. And like we've talked about before in the very beginning, when we went over our mnemonic device about the different domains and kingdoms, you should know that kingdoms are sometimes grouped into even larger classifications, and these are called domains. And there are 3 domains. There's bacteria, there's archaea and eukarya. And if you guessed that eukarya is eukaryotic cells, ding, 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 you would be correct. Eukarya are all of our eukaryotic cells, so those include protists, plants, fungi, and animals. Once again, these are our three main domains: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So for this last slide, this is a list of our 3 domains and then our 6 kingdoms. And then this explains the number of cells, whether they're prokaryotic and eukaryotic, how they obtain their energy. It includes some examples and some funny traits about them. So this is an important table to look at so that you can gain some understanding about the way that these groups and the kingdoms and domains are organized. So we have finished these classification notes. You should have learned that Carolus Linnaeus was the first person who began classification. You should know how kingdoms are organized. You should know how to name organisms, or at least why naming occurs. And you should understand the 6 kingdoms of life, the 3 domains, and which kingdom and domain contain prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells.